Economics can be broadly categorized into demand side and supply side economics. The demand side represents consumers' choices or preferences. The previous section we have discussed about the different theories of demand, how a consumer arrives at equilibrium, derivation of demand curve, decomposing price effect into income and substitution effect, and different applications of indifference curves. This section will discuss the difference between shift and movement in demand, inverse demand function, income elasticity of demand, and consumer's surplus. Moving ahead, let's discuss market demand. The individual demand curve represents various combinations of individual quantity demanded of a commodity at different prices. When the price quantity combinations of all individuals in a market are combined, it gives the market demand for a particular commodity. Moving ahead, let's discuss market demand elasticity. This relationship between price and demand determines the extent of elasticity and the slope of demand curve. If the demand is more responsive to the price, the slope decreases and the curve becomes flatter. And if the demand is less responsive to the price, the slope increases and the curve becomes steeper. Now let's discuss shift and movement in demand. Demand is a function of many variables, out of which price is the most important variable in the law of demand and in construction of demand schedule and demand curve. Other variables that affect demand include income of the buyers, taste and preferences, prices of other goods, government policies, subsidies, advertisements, etc. When there is a change in any of these variables, there will be a change in demand for the good as well. When the buyer shifts at different points on the same demand curve, it is called movement in the demand for the commodity. Whereas, if the buyer moves from one demand curve to another, it is called shift in the demand for the commodity. Now, what do you mean by extension and contraction in demand? When quantity demanded of a commodity increases or decreases due to change in price of that commodity only, other things remaining constant, the buyer moves at different points on the demand curve. It is called extension or contraction in demand. If the price of a commodity decreases, the buyer demands more of the commodity and this is called extension in demand. On the other hand, if the price of the commodity increases, the buyer demands less of the commodity and this is called contraction in demand. Let's take an illustration. Suppose a buyer demands 1 kg of chicus at rupees 80 per kg at a given point of time. Other variables including taste and preferences, income and price of other goods remaining same. If the price of chiku increases to rupees 100 per kg, the buyer will demand less than a dozen chikus and this is contraction in demand. Alternatively, if the price of chiku decreases to rupees 50 per kg, the buyer will demand 2 kgs of chiku. This is extension in demand. Let's discuss one more related concept, that is increase and decrease in demand. When quantity demanded of a commodity increases or decreases due to change in factors other than price, the buyers shift from one demand curve to another. It is called increase and decrease in demand. The factors that affect demand are income of the buyer, taste and preferences, advertisement, future expectations of prices, etc. If there is positive change in these factors, if income of the buyer increases, if their taste and preferences change in favor of the commodity, if they expect the prices to rise in future, and if advertisement influences them to buy more of the commodity, then at the same price, buyers would demand more of the commodity, which will lead to the upward shift of the demand curve. Alternatively, if the negative change in these factors, the buyer will demand less of the commodity at the same price, which will lead to downward shift in the demand curve. Let's take an illustration. Suppose a buyer demands 1 kg mangoes at rupees 100 per kg, assuming the price does not change. If there is an increase in the income of the buyer, he will demand 2 kgs of mangoes. If there is decrease in the income, he will demand less than 1 kilogram of mangoes at the same price. Next topic to discuss is inverse demand function. The demand function represents quantity demanded as a function of price. Thus, price is the independent variable and quantity demanded is the dependent variable. Mathematically, it is expressed as Q is function of P. The inverse function represents the original relationship in the function in reverse form, that is interchanging the variables. The inverse demand function represents price as a function of quantity demanded. Mathematically, it can be expressed as P is equals to F inverse Q, where F inverse is inverse function. Now, what is revenue and expenditure? Revenue is defined as the total earnings of a firm or company from the sale of its goods or services, while expenditure is defined as total expenses incurred by a firm or company while producing a given amount of goods or services. Next is elasticity and marginal revenue. Price elasticity of demand is defined as percentage change in quantity demanded due to percentage change in price. In mathematical terms, E is equals to change in Q divided by change in P multiplied by P by Q, while marginal revenue is defined as change in total revenue due to 1 unit change in quantity. In mathematical terms, MR is equals to delta TR by delta Q. Now, we know that what is elasticity and marginal revenue. Then, let's discuss the relationship between them. The relationship between demand elasticity and marginal revenue is important, since both concepts play a key role in decisions regarding price and production in economy. The demand elasticity will determine how demand will react to change in price, while marginal revenue will determine whether it is profitable to produce additional units of the commodity or not. Hence, it is important to develop a relationship between them which can be used to make vital economic decisions. It is mathematically proven that MR is equals to P multiplied by 1 plus E whole divided by E, where MR is marginal revenue, P is price and E elasticity. The formula implies E lies between minus infinity to minus 1. It means demand is elastic and MR is positive. When E is equals to minus 1, demand is unitary elastic and MR is positive. When it lies between minus 1 to 0, demand is inelastic, MR is negative. Moving ahead with income elasticity of demand. Income elasticity of demand represents the percentage change in quantity demanded due to percentage change in its income, or it is defined as degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of a good to a small change in income of the buyers. It is measured as EY is equals to proportionate change in quantity demanded divided by proportionate change in income, or we can say EY is equals to delta Q by Q whole divided by delta Y by Y. Let's take an illustration. Suppose the weekly income of a buyer is rupees 1500 and he demands 10 kilograms of vegetables. If his weekly income increases to rupees 1800, his demand of vegetable increases to 13. We can calculate the income elasticity of demand from this. EY is del Q by Q whole divided by del Y by Y. So, EY is 13 minus 10 whole divided by 10 divided by 1800 minus 1500 whole divided by 1500. Thus, EY is 3 by 10 whole divided by 300 by 1500. It is equals to 1.5. Thus, when income of a buyer increases by rupees 1, the quantity demanded of the good increases by 1.5 units. Moving further with types of income elasticities. First is, if relative income elasticity, that is EY, is greater than 1, increase in income leads to more than proportionate increase in quantity demanded. Such goods are luxuries like TV, AC, automobiles, etc. Second is relative income elasticity is less than 1. Means increase in income leads to less than proportionate increase in quantity demanded. Such goods are necessaries required for basic survival. Third is unitary income elasticity, that is EY is equals to 1. Increase in income leads to proportionate increase in quantity demanded, generally the case with normal goods. Fourth is zero income elasticity, means EY is equals to 0. Change in income has no change on quantity demanded, generally the case with neutral goods like salt, matchbox, medicine, etc. And last is negative income elasticity, EY is less than 0. Increase in income leads to a decline in quantity demanded. Such goods are inferior goods, and as the income of the buyer increases, he shifts to the superior goods and reduces the consumption of goods he feels are inferior. Now let's discuss consumer surplus. Dupuit first gave the concept of consumer surplus in 1844, which was further refined by Marshall. This concept is extremely important in welfare economics as well as for formulation of economic policies by the government, because it deals with the satisfaction aspect of the consumers. This theory is based on cardinal theory of demand and assumes that utility can be measured. It is generally believed that consumers get more satisfaction from their purchases than what they pay for it, and they will continue to purchase the good till they earn more utility than their sacrifice in terms of price paid. Consumer surplus is equals to willingness to pay minus actual payment. Consumer has different willingness to pay at different points on the demand curve based on the satisfaction he derives from the consumption of the commodity. However, the actual price is fixed by the market. The satisfaction derived by the consumer decreases as he moves down the demand curve and consumes more of the commodity. Once his willingness to pay is equals to the price he has to pay for the commodity, he will be fully satisfied and will not consume more of the commodity as his utility is less than the price he is paying. This concept is used to determine what level of prices should be set so that consumer satisfaction is maximized and optimal level of output is produced so that economy is in equilibrium. Let's conclude at the end. Today we have discussed consumer demand with reference to market demand function, elasticities, then marginal revenue, total revenue, average revenue, as well as certain topics like demand curve shift and